Hey, it's Flippin' MJ here. Welcome to the August 10th edition of Up to Date MMA. Alright, Up to Date MMA, the week August 10th here. First we want to talk about UFC on Fox 4. Probably one of the best cards that we've seen in a long time there. Obviously Machida is going to get the next title shot. I think he deserves it. You know, Shogun looked okay against Vera. It kind of made you think either Vera really stepped up his game or Shogun is just fallen. It's one of the two. Yeah,
it's I mean, when going to the Shogun Vera fight first, I think that it's kind of one of those things where what we've seen out of Shogun as of late is it seems like if he doesn't take you out in that second round, he seems to have issues gassing, is what it appears to be. But Shogun was always that type of fighter that it was really explosive, really quick.
Right.
And a lot of times you see that when these guys come up against competition that's better conditioned and they're more well-rounded athletes, they do kind of tend to gas a little quick, kind of like he did when he first came onto the UFC and fought Forrest Griffin.
Right. Yeah.
But he is a grinder. He obviously had Fight of the Year with Dan Henderson. So he has what it takes to still be one of the better fighters. But Brandon Vera, man, just putting on a show. Seeing him after that fight, cuts under both eyes, under both eyelids, and then of course the cuts under the eyebrows was kind of crazy. But he put on a pretty good fight. He just kind of had a little bit of a mental lapse when he went to fix his mouthpiece, got cracked in the back of the head and dropped. So.
Yeah. The funny thing is, besides that mental lapse, I thought he was really mentally pretty well prepared going into that fight because there was no breaking Brandon Vera. Which in previous fights, it seemed like his mental game was a little weak.
Right.
So it was an impressive showing by Vera. I think in his next outing we'll see if it was just a difference in him bringing up his game or just Shogun kind of starting to fade. And then Machida Bader, man, Bader so close, man. Machida, that was just vintage Karate Kid, type shit. That he threw that block and then that really short right hand just. Right at the same time.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I know that those are things they teach in traditional martial arts that a lot of people just kind of look past. Yeah. It happened so quick. I thought maybe, when he was coming in, I thought he was going for a punch takedown and slipped. And then when I saw him kind of drop to his back, I was like, oh, he got hit. But I didn't see the hit immediately. It was in the replays. But yeah, it was just like super fast, super short right, and that's kind of what caught him. So it was obviously the more impressive of the two victories.
Right.
And of course, going up against whether it's Dan Henderson or Jon Jones, you're looking at the only guy to have won a round against Jon Jones. So and I think if Henderson gets past Jon Jones, it should be a pretty interesting matchup to see that big overhand right against a guy who's a technical striker like that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. And then Swick and Johnson had a really good fight. Mike Swick looked great there. Varner, Lozon, Lozon finally, got the finish there, but, Jamie Varner, he looked really good too, man. His hands, his speed, his movement.
And everything seemed like it was powerful coming from Varner. It was kind of, you could see that he started to gas a little bit, but it was just, he's just coming off of a fight not too long ago,
right.
Up against a pretty game opponent in Joe Lozon. So, but those body shots that he was hitting Lozon with were just solid. And, I honestly thought when he dropped Lozon in that I think it was the first round, I thought that he was going to be able to finish it there. But, Lozon's tough, man, and that's why he's a Fight of the Night winner and multiple submissions of the nights, everything. I mean, this guy has, I think he's holding a record right now for bonuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, and that's Joe Lozon's Joe Lozon, man.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Joe Lozon, really fun to watch, always in great fights, and they just did an interview with him where he's like, I'm more interested in entertaining the fans than anything else. And like when he goes out there, obviously he's well prepared physically, mentally. He goes out there to put on a good show, and good things happen when you're trying to put away your opponent, instead of being tentative. So good look out for Joe Lozon. Okay, in other news, Frank Trigg, I don't know how much of news this really is, but got popped on a domestic violence charge. Not a lot of details on this, but it's kind of interesting. There's every once in a while there's a fighter that gets popped for something like that, and
yeah, I think the thing with the Frank Trigg thing is that it's he's a bigger name. He was popular for a real long time, commentator for Pride, so he's done a lot more as opposed to a lot of times you'll hear of a fighter getting in trouble for that, but a lot of people don't pay attention to it. It doesn't really ever make the news. The thing with Frank Trigg or even Brett Rogers a little while back was that they're bigger names. They're still kind of in the light of the MMA world, and people still see kind of what you know, they still kind of watch them and what they're doing. So yeah, even if we don't know the details, you know, it's one of these things that the courts kind of decide, you know, everything, and they're the ones that ultimately know, you know, what took place. So we'll just kind of see what comes from it.
Yeah, kind of a bad situation, you know. I still wonder sometimes, like with some of these fighters. Come on, man. You train to like hurt people for a living. You should have a little bit more control over yourself. Although, you know,
yeah,
like you said earlier, right? I'm just joking. All right. So now Rory MacDonald. Now at first, you know, it looked like maybe the BJ Penn fight wasn't going to happen, and then they just announced it's going to be on UFC on Fox 5 in December.
Right.
So,
which I think is kind of. It's pretty smart to line your fights up that far out and have a good headliner like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, we were talking earlier that the big concern is that there could be, it's a lot of time for an injury to take place.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time for anything to happen. You know, it's kind of funny though that, like John Fitch is kind of coming out recently and just saying like, you know, because BJ Penn basically wanted this fight to happen as soon as possible. He wanted to fight him in Brazil, which any guy that's, you know, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champ and has done the things that BJ Penn has done in Jiu-Jitsu, you know, it's good for him. You know, he wants to fight in a place like that. Rory MacDonald, he wants to fight out in Canada, and that's where he wanted the next fight to be, was on that next card in Canada.
Right.
And, you know, based on just that alone, here you have John Fitch kind of, I don't know, popping his head up out of nowhere and saying, hey, well, you know, BJ Penn's a coward and this and that. Like, where that comes from is beyond me. But, you know, I guess there was a comment made by BJ that he was thinking of going to San Jose to train for this fight if it was going to happen in Brazil. John Fitch basically coming out saying he's not welcome here. This is my house. I don't want him here. And he's a coward for whatever reason. I mean, the rematch never happened. I'm sure John Fitch is a little sour that it never happened. But, you know, it is what it is now. And Rory MacDonald is basically an up-and-comer, and I'm sure that, you know, if BJ is going to be testing himself against anybody, Rory MacDonald's probably a good gauge, you know, as to see where he stands still in this division. And it also is a good gauge for Rory MacDonald to see if he can beat a guy that's a legend like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's still a fight I'm looking forward to. Just to have to wait till December. Yeah, and you know, another cut could happen. Some, you know, stupid injury could happen.
Well,
a lot of different
these
stuff
cards are falling apart at a rapid rate. You know, I mean, at least all summer they have been. So anything could happen where they could basically call them up sooner than later. So that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right, and then Jon Jones just got a deal with Nike. I guess he's going to have his own signature line come out. So that's pretty cool. I mean, a good step forward, you know, for mixed martial artists. You know, he's going to be right up there with, you know, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, those guys getting big deals. So
Manny Pacquiao.
So it's good. Here's something I read the other day. I guess Shogun's management, they want him to face Alexander Gustafsson next.
Okay.
So,
which I think is a great fight. Originally, I was basically talking to somebody earlier on another show that I was doing, and we were talking about, you know, where does Phil Davis go from here? And it was prior to this last fight, because they didn't feel that he should have been on the undercard.
Right.
And they felt that he should still be at the top of the division based on you taking guys that had, you know, losses and giving them a title shot immediately, whoever performs the best. Well, you know, Phil Davis is right up there with the rest of them. Yeah. But so is Alexander Gustafsson. And so, you know, I was thinking that this would be kind of a walk in the park for Phil Davis with this fight. Obviously, that's not what happened. You know, he had the no contest and everything. But I thought that the Gustafsson and Phil Davis would have been a great fight, just so they can get that rematch going and then see who fights for #1 contender. But I mean, Gustafsson Shogun is going to be an awesome fight, I think. You know, Gustafsson comes off that really impressive win over Thiago Silva, and he hasn't done anything, you know, for a while. But I mean, to fight a guy like Shogun, that's another big name, you know, and that's somebody that can basically catapult him up to the top. And of course, if Shogun beats an up-and-comer like that, that catapults him right back to #1 contender also. Yeah,
definitely. It's a really interesting matchup. We'll see if it happens. Leave it up to the UFC to take care of that. Okay, so then Josh Koscheck out. I don't know what he's out with. Some injury.
Yeah, he did have an injury. I can't remember what it is right now at the moment.
Me neither. Anyways, but Jay Hieron, this is the good news. He's going to step in for him to face Jake Ellenberger.
Right.
So this is a rematch from like 4 or 5 years ago in the IFL. Interesting matchup because Hieron took the first one, and I mean since then Ellenberger's really only lost to pretty much top 10 competition. Right. I think with the exception of one other loss he had, but I mean.
Well, that's the same with Hieron. I think his only loss was to Ben Askren.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was an 11-1. I think is what he's been over the last couple of years. I mean, that's not his full record, but that's kind of what his last gauge was an 11-1 with that win streak minus that last loss. So I mean, he's been doing pretty well. Also, I think he's one of the best fighters out there that hasn't been in the UFC. That's my personal opinion. But you know, of course, here in Vegas, we kind of usually root for the for the Vegas fighters. So
yeah, definitely.
But it's pretty good to hear that he gets that call back up. I think that, you know, he got cut, you know, pretty early in that first UFC stint, and it was, you know, one of them was a fight where he just had a really bad gash, and it was really up to the referee. I've talked to the referees, you know, in the past about this fight. I've talked to Stitch Duran about this fight, and they just basically said, like, the smell of the iron from that cut, from the blood, because it was right in the middle of the forehead on that vein. Yeah, it was just making everybody sick. So they stopped the fight out of. It was because of them. It wasn't really because of Jay as a fighter. Yeah. And then he gets cut, and then, you know, the rest of the time he's spent out of the UFC. So I think this is a really good chance for him to come back against a big name, someone that he's already beat and could possibly beat again. And I really think that this is going to be, you know, the coming out party for Jay Hieron. Personally. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to be a good. It's going to be a good gauge of where he's at. You know, because he's developed, you know, considerably since his first stint in the UFC. All right, so now on to UFC 150. This upcoming weekend. I'm really hoping that this one goes down as well as UFC on Fox 4 did. You got Henderson, Edgar, Shields, and Herman, Melvin Guillard, and Donald Cerrone. You know, so let's start with Melvin Guillard, Donald Cerrone. You know, my opinion is I think, you know, Melvin Guillard's going to come out, and as long as he comes out blasting, I think he's going to be able to catch Cerrone pretty quickly and end it quickly. If on the other hand, if he waits back to, you know, see what Donald Cerrone does, he's going to end up getting, you know, kind of picked apart, could go to the ground. You never know. But if Guillard comes out like he did the last time, kind of tentative, it's not going to go his way. Yeah, they were just doing an interview not too long ago, and they were both talking about how they want fight of the night. That's what they want. They're old training partners, they're friends, you know, and of course these bonuses are huge. So you know, they're going to come out, they're going to bring it. One of the things that was interesting in what they were talking about was that they always pulled punches with one another. They never went, you know, balls to the wall as far as how when they were sparring or anything, which you don't do in practice anyway. So here's an opportunity for these two guys to actually really test him and push a little bit further than they always did in practice. You know, Guillard says that he knows where Cerrone's strengths are. He says the leg kicks are what always hurt him when they were practicing together. He also says that he's been working a lot on his ground game because Cerrone has a really good ground game. So, you know, it's really going to be an interesting fight to see. I don't really see it that they would go to the ground, but if it does, I think Cerrone takes it. If they're on the feet, it's really a matter of power versus technique. And, you know, Guillard has the tools that he can beat him, but I really think that Cerrone's going to wind up taking it either way. But fight of the night implications, I think it's going to be one of the best fights on the card. Yeah,
I think so too. Especially if you look at the main and the co-main event. You know, you got Jake Shields versus Ed Herman. I'm like leaning towards Jake Shields if he comes out and really, you know, implements a good game plan against Ed Herman. In an interview that they, you know, were talking to him, he said that he kind of just overlooked Ed Herman until they started watching some tape on him. You know, and Ed Herman's on a nice little tear here. He's finished his last 3 opponents. He looks awesome on the ground. His stand-up's much improved. I think he probably edges out Jake Shields in the stand-up game. On the ground, you know, Jake Shields is probably a stronger grappler, but Ed Herman's no slouch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I could see this one just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for 3 rounds, though, and ending up, you know, probably a unanimous decision to Jake Shields is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it really just depends. I was watching the Jake Shields-Akiyama fight again the other day, and he just looked, I don't know, pretty terrible, you know, in comparison to some of his other fights. The big knock on Ed Herman, though, has always been when he comes up against a grappler at that level, usually gets subbed, you know, and that's kind of what we've seen in the past. So it really just depends on how good the submission defense of Ed Herman has gotten. I think that Ed Herman's stand-up is going to be a lot better than Jake Shields. I think that he's strong in the stand-up, and if he's going to win it, that's where it's going to be. But he has to be able to stop those takedowns. But a guy coming from old Team Quest and training with some pretty tough guys in Colorado now, I don't see it being a problem for him to stuff Jake Shields' takedowns. I think that Ed Herman's going to wind up pulling it out, personally.
Yeah, I hope so. I picked Shields, though. But, all right, then to the main event, Frankie Edgar, you know, Ben Henderson, too. I have a feeling, you know, like on the pick show, that this is probably going to go 5 rounds. It's going to be a really fun, interesting fight, though, and I think Henderson is going to, you know, take it again. I'd love to see him actually finish somebody in the UFC. You know,
Yeah.
on my 5-on-5 pick show, I said, you know, of all the fighters that just grind out decisions, he's probably really the only guy that is pretty interesting for me to watch. That, you know, I'm okay with him getting those decisions because he's so active doing it. You know.
Yeah, he's kind of he reminds me of Diego Sanchez in a lot of ways. Because Diego, when he first came on the scene out of the Ultimate Fighter, this guy would, you know, he had wars with guys like Karo Parisian, Nick Diaz, and those are the kind of fights where they were fighting in the scrambles, and you had to be watching it to really see what was happening, because those were like super interesting fights, really technical, and that's the way that I see Ben Henderson when he fights. You know, everything that he does is stand up to the ground game, the transitions, everything that he does, he's fighting. And it's not like he's a guy that takes you down and lays in praise. He takes you down, he's swinging on you, he'll throw your legs to the side, he's constantly changing position. And that's what makes him interesting. That's what makes people want to watch that fight. Frankie Edgar, you know, he gets the takedowns, he does a little bit of the same. Usually Frankie Edgar's game is that he, you know, he's in and out with punches, really good movement, really good footwork. You know, I think that Henderson basically was able to kind of cut off those angles last time, and that's kind of what made that difference in a lot of the judges' eyes. There's a lot of fighters, though, that think that Edgar won that first fight. That's why there's this fight coming up. Now, here's the thing that kind of sucks, is that Dana White's already come out and he said, if Henderson loses, there will not be a third fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the reason that he's saying that is because everything that's been going on with Frankie Edgar. It's either a rematch or it's a trilogy, and they don't want to tie up the belt with the same guys and clog up the division, especially 155, where everybody's pretty much jockeying for that top position. So the way that I see it, though, I think Henderson's a really smart guy. He constantly improves. He had that loss to Anthony Pettis, and look where he is now. I think that, you know, he's gone in there. He's had 2 titles already, and I think that he just doesn't want to lose another one. His mission is to be a pound for pound top fighter, and beating somebody like Frankie Edgar, that's the way to do it.
I think he's going to come in there, and I think he's going to win convincingly this time, one way or the other. And then I think Edgar's going to retool his career, drop to 145. And probably do very well there, is what I'm thinking. All right, so coming up on August 18th. Only on pay-per-view. Just joking. It's not on pay-per-view, but it is Mayhem in Mesquite. You got Tough Enough. It's going to be a great show at the Casablanca up there in Mesquite. Headlined by Chucky Williams. We just did a nice in-depth bio and interview with Chucky, so be on the lookout for that as well. This is going to be a stacked card, man. I'm excited. This will be our first time, you know, covering a tough event where it's not been at the South Point Arena. It's going to be interesting to see the venue there at the Casablanca. Yeah,
it should be, and you know, I know that they've gone up there. I think they've done, I think they do about 1 show a year or so up towards Mesquite. What the reason is for that, I have no idea. But I mean, it's you know, it's pretty cool. I mean, to kind of head out of Vegas and kind of do something that's a little bit different. You know, they can bring in the fans from, you know, the St. George, Cedar City area up in Utah. And you know, just to bring in people that bringing MMA to the fans is kind of what they're doing. It's amateur MMA, but they're still kind of doing it. I know every now and then, you know, they head out to State Line and they do a show down there, but you know, it gives everybody an opportunity to see what these up and coming fighters look like. And you know, the guy that we're covering this last week with the in-depth bio, Chucky Williams. I mean, he's a tough kid. You know, super friendly. I think he's got one of the greatest personalities that we've seen in a while. And you know, expect great things. I mean, this kid has a really extensive background in the stand-up, and his ground game's not too bad either. So
7-1 in Muay Thai and kickboxing, 5-0 as an amateur, and the kid that he's fighting is coming in from Minnesota, a big dude. So it's gonna be a nice super heavyweight main event attraction. So come check it out. You know, come down to Mesquite, come say hi to Fight Life Media, and as always, for additional coverage and exclusive content, make sure and check us out at fightlifemedia.com.